At the recording. All right. So welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the weekend to Christiansted, Frederiksted, Kings Hill. Why not? Buck Island. Why not? St. Thomas, St. John, Water Island, our sister islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And let's say good afternoon as well. Welcome to all of our sister islands in the Caribbean, BVI, Joss Van Dyke, Tortola, Up Island, St. Kitts, Nevis, Down Island, Antigua, Puerto Rico, and the Florida Keys when the ionosphere is cooperating and the AM signal is bouncing out all over the place. And really, good afternoon, world, because we are streaming live on Facebook. And the World Wide Web. Isn't that exciting? All right. Hey, good. So, Children of the Sun, a metaphysical show devoted to positive energy from the fifth dimension. So this isn't a political show. There's nothing wrong with political shows. I listen to them all the time. I wish more people would get involved in politics. We could use some conscious voices, but it's not my lane. You know, it's not what I do. And so there's not going to be a whole lot of talking here about who didn't do what they should have done or did something they weren't supposed to do, or who you should support in the upcoming elections and all of that stuff. It's not a lecture show either, although a lot of people think it is, or they try to make it into one. But really, that's because they're not listening to it correctly. They're not listening to it right. It's a different transmission of informational energy than a lecture show. So, you know, if you want to listen to like a political show, lots of choices. A lot of good ones on our station, AM 970. Brother R just before me, excellent choice. If you want a lecture, you can go to UVI. UVI is a top-notch institution of higher learning with a lot of good lectures. This isn't well, it's not a Sunday sermon, of course, because it's not Sunday, but even if it were on Sunday, it would not be a Sunday sermon. This is not, what I do here is not a religious type Sunday sermon. I read recently, I don't know if it's true, you know, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, but I read that St. Croix has more churches per capita than any other place in the United States. But, you know, even if that particular statistic is not true, there's certainly an abundance of churches here. So if a Sunday sermon type of thing is what you're looking for, I can probably say without fear of contradiction that there's a church right around the corner from you. You could go there to hear a Sunday sermon. And if you don't like that particular church, there's an abundance of choices of churches on St. Croix. You could you know, take your pick. If a kind of Sunday sermon type of thing is what you want. But that's not what we have here. That's not what I'm going to be doing. Really, what I am doing is talking about nothing. I'm talking about the metaphysical significance of nothing, and I'm talking about this world is not here. It's an illusion. You're not here. I'm not here. You appear to see things apparently arising in your illusionary world, and you react to them. And in that reaction, you generate a kind of energy. And it's that energy that I mainly like to talk about and like to work with. Because that energy is the key. People forget about that energy. They're always being drawn out into the world and focusing all of their attention on what appears to be arising in the dream. And it completely distracts them from the energy. And the energy is the key to waking up from the dream. So there is, and like I come at this from 3 different directions. And I did not realize the overlap and the connection between them for the longest time. I was just engaged in doing 3 different things. I was doing rebirthing breath work, which is a very energetic process, or a process of working with deep deeply suppressed energies. And these energies come out and you work with them. But when you first start doing this breath work, it's all you can do to just hang on. The first few sessions are just so mind-blowing that you get totally distracted by everything that's going on. And you don't really get a chance to study the energy, to like really look at it. You're just sort of like a passenger on an out of control locomotive hanging on for dear life, trying to make it to the end of the track. But when you get skilled at it, when you do it over and over and over again to where the energy isn't like totally blowing your mind every single session, and you can calmly and objectively look at it and see what's really going on, that's when you begin to learn things and you begin to understand what the energy is doing, why it's there, what it's showing you, how it relates to your existence in the apparent dream reality. And that's when it gets fun. So that was one area that I'm coming at it from. And then another area is Course in Miracles. And Course in Miracles is like, it's called the Christian version of Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. So Shankara in Hinduism began a school. He would not say he began, he would say he brought it back to life because it was there all the time. But it's a non-dualistic school. In other words, there is only one. There is not really a universe filled of separate objects like Earth, Moon, galaxies, the Sun, Mars, the Earth, desk, chair, table, cat, dog, your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, your neighbor, cars, you in your car, you are separate from your car, and in your car is a bunch of separate objects: steering wheel, brake pedal, radio dial, and your car is a separate car from all the other cars on Earth. So non-dualism says all of that is illusion. There's actually only one thing here. And typically referred to as God, but you have to be careful. You're using the word God in a kind of absolute energy sense. God is conscious energy, infinite conscious energy with the quality of unconditional love. Not God is an old white man with a long flowing beard sitting on a golden throne with angels blowing trumpets around it. That's not what they mean by God. They mean a more absolute abstract concept, but everything is God. There's actually a famous saying: the world is illusion. Brahma, which is a Hindu name for God. The world is illusion. Brahma alone is real. So that can get you to a very pessimistic, nihilistic state. If the world is illusion, what's the point, right? The world is illusion. Brahma alone is real. But then you get the key, important third line that gets left out a lot. The world is Brahma. So that restores that overcomes the nihilistic, pessimistic flavor of the world is illusion by cluing you into the fact that the world is actually ultimate reality. And so Course in Miracles is like the Christian version of the Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualist version of Christianity, which gets into a very in-depth, detailed, and I found incredibly helpful analysis of all the things that we do to create illusion in our lives, and for mainly the illusion of separation. We see ourselves as separate from God, and then from that follows on domino, like when you line up dominoes in a row and you hit the first one, they all fall down. The first domino is we thought we separated from God. And then that knocks down, as a result of that, we feel guilty. So we're afraid of being punished. So we have a belief in sin. And we don't want to face our internal guilt, so we project it out. We think we're separate from God, which means we now believe in separation. So we create in our minds a world of separate objects. We create basically the opposite of heaven. Heaven has eternity, so we create past, present, and future. Heaven has eternal life, so we create death. Heaven has unchanging, eternal permanence, so we create impermanence, so that even mountains eventually dissolve into the sea eventually. So all of those dominoes fall as a consequence of our believing this one false belief. And the actual course part of the Course in Miracles is all about using our day-to-day lives to examine, to observe closely how we interact with other people mainly. And to catch ourselves projecting our own guilt onto other people and blaming them for our bad feelings. So rather than taking from like a top-down metaphysical approach, starting with like broad-based metaphysical concepts, which is sort of like what Sankara does in his exposition of Hindu non-duality, right? Veda Vedanta. He goes to the scriptures. So, you know, the context of it was Buddhism in India, because remember, the Buddha was originally a Hindu Indian prince. He was not from Tibet or Cambodia. He was Indian, and he was Hindu, and he was a prince. And he was trying to find, I guess we could say, the meaning of life. And he came to some conclusions, and he shared them. And his teachings began to outshine Hinduism. They began to be more popular than the local religion in India. And Shankara was kind of like the person who wanted to answer that, who wanted to show that Indian Hinduism could be just as helpful and advanced as what Buddhism was teaching that everybody likes so much, right? And one of the key differences between Hinduism and Buddhism is Hinduism, in a sense, is a very orthodox religion because they always go to the scriptures. They are like, if it's not in the scripture, it's not true. We go by the scriptures. And the Buddha was saying, don't believe it just because it's written down in a book. Don't believe it just because I say it. Test it for yourself. Examine it for yourself. See if it is true. So he was kind of like an experimenter. He was teaching people to look at things a posteriori, after the fact, after you do your experiment. Whereas Hinduism was kind of more of a priori way of going about things. You start with the overarching broad concepts, and then what do you conclude from that? What can you logically deduce from certain assumptions? And so if you assume that God is all-powerful and omnipresent everywhere, how can there possibly be anything else? Wait, all-powerful, omnipresent, and unconditionally loving. So then if that's true, how can there possibly be death anywhere else, any place else? How can there be in anything or in any place else? So they start with that basic assumption because it's in the scripture. Shankara starts with that basic assumption because it's in the Orthodox Hindu scriptures, and then makes deductions about it. And the Course in Miracles also, so the Course in Miracles is 3 books, a text and a workbook. And the text explains kind of top down from the basic assumptions. If God is all powerful and all loving and only creates perfection, God is perfect. So how could perfection create less than what is perfect? How could perfection create imperfection? So all, you know, I'm not going to go through the 600-page text with you here today, but it starts out with basic a priori statements and then makes deductions based on those and comes to the conclusion that the world you see cannot possibly be real. But it doesn't leave you there. It doesn't leave you hanging. It then, in the workbook, kind of goes into an experimental modality where you are using the daily lessons from the workbook in a kind of experimental way, acutely observing, like a scientist, your interactions with the world. And you have your normal knee-jerk reactive way of interacting with the world, which the Course says comes from the egoic mind. So that somebody does something wrong and that causes you to get upset. Somebody treats you unfairly and that causes you to get upset. And you just assume that that's what's going on. But then the Course has you really, really, really look at that in a kind of experimental, scientific sort of way. And when you do, eventually you realize that the upset actually was already in you. The upset was there before you created the universe. And when you create the universe, you create that person or that situation to blame the upset on, to produce the condition that gives you justification for the upset. And, you know, upset, anger, resentment, jealousy, feeling like you're not enough. Any kind of negative emotion or feeling like that began within your mind as a result of you thinking you had separated from God. And then you create, with the dominoes falling, you create this universe so that you can have a place to put all your guilt. So that's the experimental component of the Course in Miracles. And then the third thing that I was working with before, not realizing they were connected, was I just went also to the traditional Hindu Advaita Vedanta non-duality teachings, reading various authors to see what they had to say. So, you know, sort of like when I learned meditation from the Tibetan Buddhists, and I told them I wasn't going to become a Buddhist, I was going to remain a Christian, and they were lemon oil is like fine, or to make your it'll make your you'll be able to do your Christianity better. So I went to the what you might call the original non-duality teachings to make my understanding of the Course in Miracles and ultimately my Christianity better. And so, and at first the rebirthing, breathwork, and the Course in Miracles and the Hindu non-duality teachings were all completely unrelated, and as far as my experience goes, right? But then as I began to become more comfortable with the energy, better able to just be with it and observe it without being distracted by it, and I began to realize all of the ways in which our reaction to what appears to be going on in our world and in our relationships. So something happens, somebody does something, somebody treats us in what we perceive to be as an unfair manner, and then we react against that. And so that's like Course in Miracles workbook, and it's very kind of intellectual. You just sort of understand it on an intellectual level. But then I got with the breath work, when I could really look at the energy, I began to see how the energy that arises from that feeling of being treated unfairly is really got a lot of things going on with it. And you can almost do the experiments of the workbook from the Course in Miracles without any thoughts or words or interactions at all, just entirely in an energetic way. You just feel the energy. And the more I began to understand how that energy was creating my reality and reflecting back to me my own beliefs, unkind and untrue thoughts about myself, the more I began to understand that and to really feel it. Yeah, because understanding kind of implies concepts and words, and it's an intellectual thing. It's more of a feeling. It's more of the arising of a feeling understanding. So you're feeling into the energy, and you're grokking. You're seeing the whole situation of your interaction in the world, in the apparent world, from an energetic perspective rather than from an ego mind-based wordy concept perspective. So it's like you're directly seeing instead of creating word stories about stuff. Most people walk around, they don't really interact with reality. They interact with the story in their head, the narrative, the voice in the head, the word stories about stuff. And a lot of people don't even realize there's a difference. But when you get to, it's kind of similar to a story that I tell about my epiphany on meditation and the Buddhist cliche, monkey mind. If you do any kind of meditating in any kind of Buddhist tradition, you're going to hear the expression monkey mind, which I took and most people take, and it's probably the correct understanding. The thoughts in your head are like monkeys jumping around on a tree. They're constantly jumping around, and you're always getting distracted by the jumping monkeys, and you're watching the jumping monkeys. And so the purpose of meditation, they will tell you, is to quiet down the monkeys, to get your thoughts to settle down so they're not so distracting. And so I thought I understood that, but then I had an epiphany quite by accident. I was watching a documentary on, it was like Animal Planet, maybe, or the Discovery Channel or something. And coincidentally, but not really coincident, because there are no coincidences, our mind creates our reality to give us clues. But coincidentally, the show was this particular clip. They were showing monkeys in a tree in India. And this was a huge tree. There's like 80 to 100 monkeys at least, maybe more, in the tree. And they were completely losing it, people. They were jumping up and down, howling and yelling and screaming, waving their arms, doing somersaults and backflips, standing, 1 minute they're standing on the legs, then they're doing a headstand. There was one really memorable occasion where there was, I remember this is a huge tree, and on one side of the tree was a branch with like 5 or 6 monkeys on it, and on the other side of the tree was another branch with maybe 4 monkeys on it. And somehow, both groups of monkeys jumped up into the air at the same time, passed each other in the air without hitting each other, bumping into each other, and settled down on the other group's branch. So, just think about the coordination required for that. If they had not both jumped up, the ones that did would have had no place to land. If all of the monkeys had not gone, there wouldn't have been enough room for all of the monkeys landing. It was just, and it didn't look like the monkeys were like exchanging glances and coordinating this thing. Okay, let's switch branches. All the monkeys in the tree were doing all kinds of stuff. And then just out of nowhere, the 6 monkeys on this branch and the 4 monkeys on this branch just leapt into the air and switched branches. And so there was all kinds of things like that going on. And this clip went on for a good 5-10 minutes. And then they cut to something else. And the announcer starts talking in his like low-key, sleepy voice. I think it was David Attenborough. He's the only person I know talks like that. But I didn't hear a word he said after that, because I was sitting there stunned, because it suddenly hit me. I've been watching these monkeys jumping on this tree for 10 minutes, and I could describe to you in every minute detail exactly what those monkeys looked like, from head to foot, front and back. I mean, I could give you a hair by hair description of what those monkeys looked like. But I could not tell you the first thing about the tree, even though I had been looking at it for 10 minutes. I didn't have any idea. Did the tree have like rough branches or smooth, big ones or small? Did it have leaves? What shape were they? Nothing. There was absolutely nothing in my memory about what the tree looked like that I had been looking at for 10 minutes, because I was so distracted by the antics of the monkeys. And that's when I really got the meaning of monkey mind. Your thoughts in your head that are constantly running around the inside of your skull nonstop, telling you this, telling you that, describing things. Those are the monkeys. And when you get so, and the human condition is that we get so distracted by the monkeys, we never see the tree. So what is the tree in the context of meditation? The tree is your essential nature. It is who and what you really are. Apart from story, apart from narrative, apart from your history. I am a teacher living in St. Croix. That is not who you are. That tree is who you are, that essential nature, your connection to ultimate reality. You are ultimate reality, is what you realize eventually. But you never know that, you never see that if you never see the tree, if you never get to the first base with your essential nature. And the monkeys, the thoughts distract you. So the point of meditation is to calm the monkeys down. It's like you're walking around giving them all bananas so they get full and go to sleep. So now all the monkeys are asleep all throughout the tree and they're not moving around. And now you can look at the tree and you can really look at the tree, your essential nature. You can really get into really close to examining and seeing what is my essential nature. Who am I really? But I always warn people, the first time you do this, invariably, inevitably, what happens is as soon as you get a glimpse of the tree of your essential nature, you're so astounded and amazed that you go, oh my God, you think to yourself, oh my God, this is amazing. How long has this been here? Okay, you just kicked one of the monkeys, because that's a thought. So you just kicked one of the monkeys with that first thought. And the monkey is waking up and starting to stir and disturbing other monkeys, and then they're starting to wake up and stir and move around, and the next thing you know, you've got a tree full of moving monkeys again, and you're not looking at the tree. You completely lost contact with the tree, and you don't see it anymore. And so, you know, that's why the instruction in meditation is, if a thought arises, just ignore it. Let it go back to sleep. Don't follow it. Don't engage with it. Don't beat yourself up. Oh, I'll never get this. A thought came up and I had the tree, I had the essential nature. And then as soon as I had it, I lost it because I started thinking about how wonderful this is. And so that's why they tell you, don't beat yourself up, because that's just more thoughts. And every thought generates, subsequent thoughts. And the next thing you know, your mind is full of thoughts, the tree's full of jumping monkeys, and you've lost it. But that's to be expected. When you first start working with meditation, that's what's going to happen. So you don't beat yourself up, because that just generates more thoughts. Let the thought, oh my God, this was amazing, quiet down, let the monkey go back to sleep, and just come back to your meditation. And if you don't get it the first sitting, and it's not like people sit down to meditate for the first time in their lives and 15 minutes later open their eyes as enlightened Buddhas. It might take, it will take practice. It's a skill. But eventually you get to the point where you can just really look at that essential nature. And so that's a similar thing that I was working with the energy from a rebirthing session, a rebirthing breathwork session, where I became so accustomed to it that as the energy is flowing through me, I'm not being distracted by the powerful force. I'm able to really look at it, and through becoming comfortable with the essential nature and also the essential nature of the energy, I begin to understand the workbook lessons, for example, of the Course in Miracles better. And I begin to understand the non-dual teachings of Hinduism better. And so you can look at them as like three legs of a stool, and they are three legs of a stool. And having all three makes the stool a little more functional. And so, you know, there's an intellectual, conceptual, wordy way of going about it, and there's the energetic way of going about it. And what I ultimately saw when I got to the point where I was so comfortable with the energy that I could really feel and see what it was actually doing, that shed a whole new light on the intellectual conceptual way of going about things. And I'm not the first person to like talk about both. They're just usually kept very segregated and separated. And there's not a real connection drawn between the energetic understanding and the conceptual understanding. But Michael Brown in the presence process gets into it a little. He talks about how if something arises in your outside world, like somebody comes and treats you unfairly as you perceive it, right? Our tendency is to react angrily against being treated unfairly, and then to tell that person, you know, you so-and-so, you're treating me unfairly, why are you doing this? And to like defend ourselves, to push back, because we don't like the way it feels, and so we feel the need to push back. But he calls that shooting the messenger. He says, don't shoot the messenger. This person bringing you this unfair treatment, and you know, unfair is an example. It could be any of a number of things, but it's just easier to pick one kind of thing and just stick with it throughout. So the person who appears to be treating you unfairly is actually bringing you a message. And your job, or what you should do, is to take the message, to receive the message and study the message, not shoot the messenger. Some people even go so far as to say you should be grateful to the messenger. You should be grateful to this person for treating you unfairly, because that's showing you, it's getting you in touch with the energy so that you can look at it, so you can look at the message. You've probably, or you may well have heard the expression, the thorn in your side, the person in your life who gives you the most trouble and is the hardest for you, the most difficult person in your life, is like a gift from God. That's who you should, and you should be really grateful to that person more than anyone else, because they're really your teacher. They are really teaching you something. But again, it's the idea from Michael Brown's presence process of not shooting the messenger. Take the message, study the message, and the message is an energetic one. In the presence process, he makes it kind of an intellectual thing again, where you look at, you try to examine your own thoughts and memories and find out what happened to you maybe early in your life that causes you to find yourself being unfairly treated. And you try to use this experience to bring that up out of suppression, because anything that you don't like, you suppress. And you don't like the energy, so the first time it arose, you suppressed it. And then it's still there. And anytime anything happens in your life that remotely resembles that first experience, you're going to have that energy arise again, and that's going to make you feel like you're being treated unfairly. So it's really all about like the interconnection between our beliefs about ourselves and how that shows up in our experiences in the outer world. So he's trying to come at it from like an intellectual concept. He even talks about cycles You have cycles in your life. When you're 7, then you're 14, then you're 21, and each 7-year cycle is usually connected to a particular kind of relationship of yours to other people and to the outside world. So he's trying to dig into all of that and find the clues that will allow you to unearth the original cause of feeling upset, feeling unfairly treated, so that you can heal it once and for all. But that's a very intellectual, conceptual thing, because what I found is that the feeling of upset is an energy. And you think the first time it happened, you thought it felt bad, and so you suppressed it. But if you get comfortable with the energy from like doing a breathwork session, then when you really look at the energy, it doesn't feel bad. Actually, it feels good, which is not surprising, or shouldn't be, because the energy is your own life force energy. It is the same life force energy that gives life to the plants and the flowers, the vegetables in your garden, your pets, the mongoose. It is life, it's life force, and it takes the form of you and gives you health and vitality when it's flowing freely and without obstruction and without blockage. So it feels good. When it feels bad, that's only like on a superficial level, because you judged the situation as wrong and then associate the feeling with the situation. And it's really your resistance to feeling the energy that makes it feel bad. It's never the feeling itself. It's always the resistance to the feeling. Feeling is healing. Feeling is healing. When you allow yourself to feel the energy without censorship, without really trying to explain it in terms of anything going out in the outside world. When you feel unfairly treated, and this energy arises, and you say to yourself, this energy is because that person was unfair to me. You've taken energy, which is completely neutral, and you put a label of negativity on it. So now you think it's bad. So now you don't want to feel it. So now you're pushing against it, trying to push it way down into your subconscious, into your body. You know, your body is a physical body, a mental body, an energy body, a causal body. You know, in the apparent reality that you created in your mind, you think that you have a solid physical form, and other people have solid physical forms, and there's complete separation between you and them. You are in here in your body, and they're over there on the other side of the room in their bodies. But even modern day science will tell you that that's not actually true, that you're mostly empty space. And in fact, if I touch this mouse, it looks like I'm touching the mouse. It looks to you like I'm touching the mouse. It looks to me like I'm touching the mouse. I can feel it. I'm obviously touching the mouse, but actually that's not true. We are, both the mouse and I have electromagnetic fields that repulse each other like a magnet. Like when you try to take, you play those games as a kid where you would take the magnet and you turn them one way and they'd stick together, and then you turn them the other way and they'd fly apart, or that you could not get them to go together. That's what's going on when you touch something. you're not actually touching it. There's always like a minute distance separating you from the thing that you're touching. So all of this apparent solidity that we think we see is not actually real. So you could think of yourself really as like an energetic field. And this life force energy is, you are life force energy, taking the form, the shape of Joe Smith from Kristen's Day. And as that and so when you have an experience that you judge to be upsetting or unfair, someone's treating you unfairly, you take the energy associated with that and you make it wrong, and then you try to push it deeper down into your energy field. And then it creates blockages, it gets in the way, it slows up the flow, it prevents the life force energy from flowing freely and harmoniously. So when you work with the energy as a way of directly seeing the cause of the upset, why that situation happened to you in your life, how you created it from the pre-existing feeling of not being treated fairly, which began at the beginning of time when you perceived yourself as not being treated fairly by God. And then that's been sort of like extended throughout all of time. No, there is no time. All of this is happening now. Every moment is happening now. Your millions of past lives and your millions of future lives were all created just now. You thought you separated from God. You thought God was being unfair. You project a universe not only in space, but also in time. Even multidimensional universes, all taking, that's why you have different levels of existence in different religions. Christianity, you have hell, purgatory, earth, and heaven. The Eastern religions have those levels, but then they also have like the realms of the gods, the realms of the avatars, higher and higher levels that you can go to. But even, and because at the beginning of time, when you first created all of this, you created different levels to have different experiences. But the Tibetans say that this is the best level, and that a human birth is the best birth to have. And they point out that like the realms of the gods, everything seems wonderful. They live tens of thousands of years. There's never a problem. They're always in happy bliss, always enough food to eat. They get whatever they want. Everything's wonderful. But it is not eternity. It's still time-based. Eventually they die. Eventually they get old, get sick, and die. And in fact, there's kind of a cruel aspect to it, because when one of the gods gets like a gray hair, all the other gods run away, pull away. They don't want anything to do with them. They don't want to see that. They're afraid they'll catch it. And so it's usually the last few hundred years of a god's life are a pretty miserable and lonely affair. And then, and so what, you get the god's life because you've piled up tons of positive karma, tons of merit, so you get to have a auspicious birth. But eventually you use up your merit. It always has to come back into balance. So you use up your merit, and then aging begins, and even the gods eventually die. And no matter how much they meditate, they cannot become enlightened. They cannot get to enlightenment. That you don't go to the realm of the gods because you're enlightened. You're just going there because of your positive karma. And no matter how much a god meditates, he or she cannot become enlightened. no matter how much your dog, no matter how human-like you may think your dog is, your dog will never become enlightened. No animal, no insect can ever become enlightened. The only creature that can become enlightened, that is, see through the illusion of separation from God. Only human beings can do that. That's why the Tibetan Buddhists say it's like the most fortunate birth you could possibly have, and you don't want to waste it. Now, they even have a story. They talk about, imagine a giant sea tortoise swimming in a vast ocean. Well, like the Atlantic, you could just make it real, say the Atlantic Ocean. So imagine, no, let's say the Pacific, because the Pacific is even bigger. So you've got this gigantic, not like, I don't mean like Loch Ness Monster gigantic, just maybe 30 feet across, a big sea turtle swimming through the Pacific. And it can go all over the place. It does go all over the place. One month it might be off the coast of Japan. The next thing you know, it's off the coast of California. So it's just swimming all over the place. And also in the Pacific at the same time is a ring of seaweed. Basically some seaweed that has formed itself into a circle, and it's floating on the top of the ocean. And so this sea tortoise, this gigantic sea tortoise, only has to come up for air every 100 years. So it swims down, it swims around for 100 years, and every 100 years, it pokes its head out of the water to take a breath. Meanwhile, this ring of seaweed is floating around on the surface of the water. Most of the time, the seaweed is not going to be anywhere near the sea turtle. Maybe occasionally, the seaweed will be within, spitting distance of the sea turtle. But the sea turtle will still, when it comes up for air, completely miss the ring of seaweed. But over time, because this is a magical sea turtle, so it lives forever, and I guess the ring of seaweed also lasts forever. Eventually, with the turtle swimming around the vastness of the ocean and the ring of seaweed floating around on the surface top of the ocean, and the turtle coming up every 100 years, eventually, sooner or later, the turtle is going to poke its head through the ring of seaweed. And they say that is how rare a human birth is. So that's how fortunate you are to have a human birth. And so, because human beings are the only creatures capable of seeing through the illusion, it behooves us to know what are some really skillful means for seeing through the illusion. And a lot of the Course in Miracles and Advaita Vedanta from Hinduism and some of the higher teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are intellectually useful for seeing through the illusion, but you can't think your way to it. You won't ever get there by studying or meditating or thinking about it. I believe, as I say, when you get to where the monkeys have completely stopped and you can look at your essential nature, look at the tree in meditation, and then also look and feel the energy, the life force energy. The tree is made of life force energy. The life force energy is the tree. We make them separate in our conceptual understandings. The energy is the situation that takes place in the outer world where somebody appears to be treating you unfairly. It is all energy. And as soon as you get to the place where you are working the Course in Miracles or working a non-dual understanding on an energetic level, your progress starts making quantum leaps. It's almost as though the conceptual understanding, the words, well, actually, it's not almost as in, they call them pointers, right? This is not the truth. This is a pointer to the truth. Don't confuse the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. The finger is pointing at the moon. It's the moon, not the finger pointing. The words and all the sacred scriptures are pointing to something else, a reality that goes beyond the words, a reality that you cannot possibly comprehend with words. Words are inherently dualistic. Language is dualistic. So you're in a dream, you suffering from the limitations of the dream, trying to wake up within the dream. But we have there are some words available to us that come as close as close as possible to getting you to that understanding. But they themselves, the words themselves, will tell you this isn't going to do it. This is going to get you to the door, but you've got to step through it. And this is pointing at the door, but don't waste all your time studying the words that are pointing or looking at the pointing finger. Go to the door, step through it. And that's an energetic thing. That's an energetic process. That requires working with the energy and leaving the words completely behind. The words can get you ready and prepare you, but the actual stepping through is all energy. But it's not, it's not easy because we are really wrapped up in the words in our head. Like I said a little while ago, most people think the voice in the head is them. They can't imagine, like they don't even realize there's a difference. I have my essential nature and I have thoughts in my head that I sometimes use to deal with situations. For them, the thoughts in the head never stop. And, Eckhart Tolle talks about this in Power of Now. He tells a story of he was on the bus, or it might have been train. He's going, or bus, I guess. He's going to the university. And there's a woman on the bus. Sitting across from him. And even though the bus is very crowded and a lot of people are standing, she's got both seats on either side of her are empty. And he quickly realizes why. It's because nobody wants to sit next to her because the woman appears quite totally obviously out of her mind. She's talking to herself. She's carrying on an imaginary conversation with someone who is not there. And what she's saying is things like, so then she said to me, you were not fair to me. You treated me in such an unfair way. And then I said to her, how dare you accuse me of being unfair to you when it was you who treated me so unfairly? So the woman is stuck in her egoic voice in the head conditioning. She's stuck in the past. She's running something in her head over and over and over again, some incident from her past that she feels the need to justify herself over, that she feels she was unfairly treated and she needs to defend herself about. So, quite probably she's not carrying on an imaginary conversation with someone about something that happened this morning. It's probably from decades ago. So She's just going through her life stuck in the past because the ego creates past, present, and future, muttering to herself over and over and over again about this incident, reliving it over and over and over again. So stuck in the negativity. And she doesn't even realize that she's talking out loud. And in Eckhart Tolle, this was before his enlightenment, he continues the story. The bus comes to his stop and he's getting off at the university, and the woman gets off as well. And it turns out they're going to the same place, the University of London. And he's beginning to wonder, is she a fellow student? Is she one of the professors here? Maybe she's the experimental subject of some psychology professor's scientific study. He loses her in the hallway in the elevator, so he never answers that mystery. But then he has to use the bathroom, and when he goes in, he's by himself. Later on, another man comes in, and Eckhart's washing his hands, looking at himself in the mirror, and thinking like, oh my God, I hope I don't wind up like her. I'm always thinking thoughts too, thinking constantly. My mind never stops. And then the other man looks at him and he realizes he was talking out loud. Eckhart Tolle, he didn't know that he was talking out loud. And then he began to realize that we're all like that woman with the voice in the head that never stops talking. It's just that it's a difference of degree, not of kind. It's degree, not kind. It's we mainly keep our voice inside our head and don't speak it out loud. And we don't tend to belabor negative experiences year after year after year. We change them. But really what we do is we suppress them so that we can survive. And then we move on to the next negative experience that we can feel unfairly treated by, or slighted by, or justified in reacting against out of a sense of injustice or anger. Because that's what keeps the whole egoic thing going. That's what keeps the whole universe going. Remember, you created this universe as a way to escape from your guilt. So you don't want it to end, because you fear that if it ends, you're going to have to face the consequences of your guilt. So you are constantly keeping the voice in your head alive, talking to yourself like a kind of hypnotic pattern. Telling yourself the story of your life from, in the case of the usual person, a kind of negative perspective, which is always looking for what's wrong. And again, we created all this now out of this sense of separation and guilt. And the mind creates all of this in this instant. Maybe it would help to talk about the universe was created last Tuesday theory. So there's a theory going around quantum physicists right now. It's like a speculative hypothesis saying the universe was created last Tuesday. Prove me wrong. And then somebody will say, well, we know we measure galaxies. They're speeding away from where we believe the Big Bang took place. We know the speed, so we can calculate the distance, and we know the distance they've traveled, so we can calculate how long they've been traveling, and they've been traveling away from each other for like 500 billion years. So we know the universe was not created last Tuesday. It's at least 500 billion years old. And then the comeback will be, no, the universe was created last Tuesday. And when it was created with all of those galaxies being at the particular locations that you are looking at through your telescope. And the laws of physics and mathematics were also created last Tuesday to give the number, to produce the results and numbers that would tell you that they've been traveling for 500 billion years. Actually, they've only been traveling since last Tuesday. So then another person will say, well, I'm 40 years old and I remember when I was 4. So obviously the universe was not created last Tuesday. And then the answer will be no, the universe was created last Tuesday. And when it was created, you were created as a 40-year-old man with memories of a 3-year-old. So the universe is created now. And when it was created, we created a well, I've lost my point. Sorry. A biological understanding of something I was going to say. Maybe it'll come back to me. So we get, like this woman on the bus, we get caught up in our conditioning, and if you only do it a little bit, you're considered normal. If you do it a lot and out loud, you're considered to require medical attention. But if you really look at it, this voice in the head, for the most part, is insane. And so most people have this ongoing conversation that looks at life from a negative perspective. And even when things are going well, they never last. So eventually even the positive becomes negative. And so when I talk about this show being positive energy from the 5th dimensional perspective, I'm not talking about like a Pollyannish positivity where you ignore what's really going on. We do the shadow work, because ultimately it's by seeing through the illusion, by doing the shadow work, that you get to the other side where you can be experiencing life from a positive perspective, from a truly positive perspective. Because eventually, ultimately, what you come to find out is that you actually are not guilty. You did not separate from God, and God did not treat you unfairly. I often compare it to when you were a kid, in the middle of the night, shivering and like sitting up in the middle of your bed by yourself, trembling because you were totally convinced there was a monster in your closet, and you're just panicked and you're afraid to go look. But if you ever do work up the courage to actually go look and open up the door, you see there's nothing there, and then you're completely fine, right? So it's the same thing with this whole idea of creating your universe of suffering through the nonstop, hypnotically captivating voice in your mind to keep it all going, to keep you here so that you don't face the music and face your guilt. But if you can ever work up the courage to face the music and face your guilt, to open up the bedroom closet door, you find out you're not guilty. God did not throw you out of heaven. You didn't separate. You're not separated. All this is an illusionary experience to help you not have to face your guilt, but the guilt is not real. That's why I think in the parable of the prodigal son, where Jesus talks about the king's son left the king, asked for his father for his inheritance, and then left the kingdom, went out in the world, had lost all his money, was hungry, got beaten up, was miserable, and finally decided to go back to his father's kingdom. He didn't think he'd get a very warm welcome. His father was going to be mad at him for leaving, and he probably would not accept him back as his son, but maybe he could get back in as his slave. And better to be a slave. If I'm a slave in my father's kingdom, I'll be better off than I am out here on my own. But when he gets back, his father welcomes him with open arms and throws a feast in his honor. And so I believe that was Jesus's version of the Garden of Eden story. Garden of Eden story in Genesis, Adam and Eve disobeyed God, and God punished them by kicking them out of paradise or the kingdom of God. Jesus's version, the king and his kingdom is obviously God and the kingdom of God. And the son, the prodigal son, is obviously all of us. And Jesus is saying, God did not kick you out of paradise. You left of your own free will because you wanted to. And you don't have to be afraid of being punished when you get back. When you go back, you're going to be welcomed with open arms. God is just waiting for you to come back. This whole idea you have in your head about you did something terrible and awful and you can never be forgiven is just all in your head. I mean, that was why Jesus came resurrected from the dead, to show us that death is not real. The wages of sin is death. If death is not real, then sin has no consequence. It has no effect. If a cause has to have an effect. If there's no effect, then the cause does not exist. So sin does not exist. Sin is not real, which is why Jesus was able to come back from the dead. It's another teaching. And the ultimate teaching is this world is not real. It is all a creation of your mind, and you created it now. And a lot of people with that kind of, if you really study scriptures about non-duality and Course in Miracles and do the workbook lessons and Michael Brown's presence process, where you're trying to find the ultimate cause of everything, all of that can get you really close, but they're pointers. The ultimate movement through the door is the ultimate return to the kingdom is through perceiving directly with the energy. And even that is not actually the return to the kingdom, because it's still perception, it's not vision, but it gets you close. It gets you as close to vision, seeing truly, seeing arightly, as perception can. And it gets you as close to waking up as you can be in this world. The Course has an interesting distinction. It talks about the illusionary world of the ego, and the real, R-E-A-L, real world of the Holy Spirit. Because that's the two thought systems you're choosing between, love and fear. The thought system of the Holy Spirit, which is based in love, and the thought system of the ego, which is based in fear. And the thought system of the ego based in fear keeps you basically in hell, here, in this level of existence. The thought system of the Holy Spirit based in love. So it's interesting. It calls it the real world, but then it takes pains to say it's not actually real. It's just the happiest version of the dream that you can have before you wake up. And one understanding is that it's less of a shock when you wake up if you go from nightmare of the ego to happy dream of the Holy Spirit first. Then the change, the sudden change isn't so shocking. Of course, says you are asleep in heaven, dreaming of exile. So you're actually in heaven, in the kingdom of God, dreaming that you're here. So when you start to do these, it's all about consciousness. You can go through life being totally oblivious and unconscious to everything in your experience. Somebody does something you don't like, you get mad, you don't talk to them for a week. Then, just the normal trauma and drama of ordinary mundane human existence. You go on Facebook and you watch the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, or you watch Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, and you weigh in with your opinion. And it's all this bread and circus to keep you out in the world, so you never get conscious about what's going on inside your own mind. And that's where the key to awakening is. That's where the key to making your ordinary life better is. It's a progressive kind of a thing. There's like personal growth, which eventually becomes spiritual growth. And the more conscious you are of what's going on inside your own mind and body, because feelings and emotions are a bodily thing. People want to make it all about the head, keep you in the head space. You will need to come down into the heart space. It's what's going on in the heart that is how you are actually dealing with your everyday existence. So that's where you begin to go when you become conscious enough to stop living life on autopilot, just automatically, like a programmed little robot doing what you're supposed to do, doing what people expect you to do, doing what your parents told you should do. Becoming conscious, becoming consciously in charge of your energy. And so when you begin to, so like I was saying, that you're in a happy dream. You're still not actually in heaven. So long as you have a physical body, so long as you need to eat, so long as you look at in the mirror and you see a physical form there, you're not actually fully 100% awake. When you fully wake up, you won't be here anymore. You won't have any need for here, this universe that your mind has created in order for you to learn your lessons and eventually wake up. But that journey will never even begin with the very first step until you become consciously aware of the fact that well, what is going on out there is just a distraction, and it's irrelevant, completely irrelevant and meaningless, and does not matter at all. What matters is what is going on in here. What energy is arising from your heart? And how does that energy feel? And how does it feel intrinsically in and of itself? And how does it feel because you're reacting against it, resisting it, trying not to feel it, trying to keep it away, trying to suppress it down? When you feel the energy as it is, then you will, instead of perceiving the egoic illusion of what appears to be going out there in the universe that you created to justify your feeling of upset, so that you felt you could feel justified in resisting it because you don't want to feel it. Then the situation transforms. That's what the Course in Miracles calls a miracle. The situation is no longer creating upset. You're no longer being treated unfairly. The situation itself reflects back to you your new higher understanding, your new consciousness. So now you're going from perceiving in an egoic way to having the vision of Christ, seeing things how Christ saw them. Christ was being crucified and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He wasn't seeing them the way you or I might see them. He was seeing them through Christ's vision in a completely different way. And so that was the vision of the Holy Spirit, as opposed to the perception of the ego. Vision is always whole and true and complete. Perception is subject to illusion. Our perceptions are constantly misleading us. You know parallel lines do not intersect, but you go look at a railroad track receding off over the horizon, and it looks like they're intersecting. So our perceptions, we have this experience on an almost daily basis where our perception misleads us. It's optical illusion time. So the perceptions of the ego can mislead. You can perceive something to be different than how it actually is. And it's really almost a matter of choice. You choose how you will perceive. You will perceive this person as your enemy who is doing bad stuff to you, or you will perceive them as Christ, just like you, and only either offering love or asking for love. So there is a preparatory function about all of this, and the energy has a preparatory function to get you ready. And the intellectual, conceptual stories and narratives and words, and even some of the more advanced psychological self-help books have a preparatory quality to them. And some people don't need to do anything at all. Some people need to suffer greatly because they suffer so much that the ego mercifully just turns off. For some, the simple words of the scriptures is enough of a pointer that Usually, they don't spend the rest of their lives studying the teachings in written form, or even going to see teachers and receiving teachings in spoken form. Sometimes they just go off by themselves, go on retreat and make themselves totally isolated and spend 2 or 3 years trying to get to the door, get through the door. But my personal experience is that using the words as pointers, and then and the words as pointers, there is an energetic aspect to all of this. Course in Miracles talks about some energy stuff. Eckhart Tolle talks about some energy stuff. Eckhart Tolle's favorite meditations, when he talks about presence, but then he says, if you want to experience presence and not just talk about it, meditate on the energy in your body. Feel the energy in your hand. Feel the energy in your right hand. And he has exercises that help you do that. And I do sometimes. I have my little UFO exercise for that. But then feel the energy in your left hand. Feel the energy in your big toe. Feel it in your right foot. Feel it in your left foot. Feel it in your leg. And eventually you can join all the energy and all the parts of your body together and become a big sphere of energy. And you you use that as a meditation tool, because if you're placing your awareness on the energy in your body, you don't have any left over for thoughts, for the egoic mind, for the egoic conditioning. You don't go following the monkeys. You're focused on the energy. So there's a quality, all of the pointers usually acknowledge or recognize that in some way, shape, or form, you're going to have an energetic experience on your way to the door. And they usually issue the standard warning, do not get distracted so much by the energetic experience that you stop making progress towards the door. You don't want to hang around in the energetic stuff too long and get delayed. But it is a useful the phase to go through, because it helps you see the door more clearly. When you look at the door through your egoic conditioning, the perceptual illusion of the egoic mind, you don't see the door, or the door appears very frightening, or the door appears impossible to get to. When the door shows up in your life as a situation, it shows up as this is the way it is. I'm completely right. They're completely wrong. It couldn't possibly be any different. There's nothing to do about this. I cannot love this person. When you see it through the energetic Christ vision, the door is not frightening, and the situation miraculously transforms so that you can see what's actually going on. And when you see that it's easy to forgive because this actually never happened, then making the energy wrong, like I said, the energy itself actually feels good. What feels bad is the resistance to the energy. Lack of forgiveness is resistance to the energy. When you don't want to forgive, you don't want to allow the energy. You resist the energy. And when you see through the eyes, the Christ vision, through the energetic way, then you see that it didn't actually happen. So there's nothing to forgive. So forgiveness is easy. And then since you now are forgiving, you're allowing the energy. So the situation in your outer world transforms miraculously, but then also the situation in your inner world transforms. The energy that felt bad because you didn't want to forgive and you were resisting it, now you're accepting it and you are forgiving and you're not resisting it anymore. So you're feeling the energy as it actually is, not as you were making it. And all of a sudden, wow, this feels great. So then the energy feels great, feels good. So it's all connected. And yeah, I really think using the getting comfortable and becoming at home with these energies gives you a leg up on understanding the scriptural word, intellectual, conceptual, pointing to the moon, pointing at the door. You know, you can even put it like this. If all you have is words, then you have a finger pointing to the door, but the room is dark. You have a general idea of which direction the finger is pointing, but you can't really see the door all that well, and you're not really sure, is it like a foot away or is it 50 feet away? How big is this room anyway? When you work with the energy, it's like having a flashlight. The energy becomes your flashlight and you can see better. So it's a great aid, it's a great assistance. So I wanted to close today by reading from A Course in Miracles, the workbook, lesson 153. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. You who feel threatened by this changing world, its twists of fortune and its bitter jest, its brief relationships and all the gifts, in quotes, it merely lends to take away again, attend this lesson well. The world provides no safety. It is rooted in attack, and all its gifts, in quotes, of seeming safety are illusory deceptions. It attacks and then attacks again. No peace of mind is possible where danger threatens thus. The world gives rise but to defensiveness, for threat brings anger. Anger makes attack seem reasonable, honestly provoked, and righteous in the name of self-defense. Yet is defensiveness a double threat, for it attests to weakness and sets up a system of defense that cannot work. Now are the weak still further undermined, for there is treachery without and still a greater treachery within. The mind is now confused and knows not where to turn to find escape from its imaginings. It is as if a circle held it fast, wherein another circle bound it, and another one in that, until escape no longer can be hoped for, nor obtained. Attack, defense, defense, attack become the circles of the hours and the days that bind the mind in heavy bands of steel with iron overlaid, returning but to start again. There seems to be no break nor ending in the ever-tightening grip of the imprisonment upon the mind. Defenses are the costliest of all the prices which the ego would exact. In them lies madness in a form so grim that hope of sanity seems but to be an idle dream beyond the possible. The sense of threat the world encourages is so much deeper and so far beyond the frenzy and intensity of which you can conceive that you have no idea of all the devastation it has wrought. You are its slave. You know not what you do in fear of it. You do not understand how much you have been made to sacrifice, who feel its iron grip upon your heart. You do not realize what you have done to sabotage the holy peace of God by your defensiveness. For you behold the Son of God as but a victim to attack by fantasies, by dreams, and by illusions he has made, yet helpless in their presence, needful only of defense by still more fantasies and dreams, by which illusions of his safety comfort him. Defenselessness is strength. It testifies to recognition of the Christ in you. Perhaps you will recall the text maintains that choice is always made between Christ's strength and your own weakness seen apart from him. Defenselessness can never be attacked because it recognizes strength so great, attack is folly, or a silly game a tired child might play when he becomes too sleepy to remember what he wants. Defensiveness is weakness. It proclaims you have denied the Christ and come to fear his Father's anger. What can save you now from your delusion of an angry God whose fearful image you believe you see at work in all the evils of the world? What but illusions could defend you now when it is but illusions that you fight? We will not play such childish games today, for our true purpose is to save the world, and we would not exchange for foolishness the endless joy our function offers us. We would not let our happiness slip by because a fragment of a senseless dream happened to cross our minds, and we mistook the figures in it for the Son of God, its tiny instant for eternity. We look past dreams today and recognize that we need no defense because we are created unassailable, without all thought or wish or dream in which attack has any meaning. Now we cannot fear, for we have left all fearful thoughts behind. And in defenselessness, we stand secure, serenely certain of our safety now, sure of salvation, sure we will fulfill our chosen purpose as our ministry extends its holy blessing through the world. Be still a moment, and in silence, think how holy is your purpose, how secure you rest, untouchable within its light. God's ministers have chosen that the truth be with them, Who is holier than they? Who could be sure that his happiness is fully guaranteed? And who could be more mightily protected? What defense could possibly be needed by the ones who are among the chosen ones of God, by his election and their own as well? It is the function of God's ministers to help their brothers choose as they have done. God has elected all, but few have come to realize his will is but their own. And while you fail to teach what you have learned, salvation waits and darkness holds the world in grim imprisonment. Nor will you learn that light has come to you and your escape has been accomplished. For you will not see the light until you offer it to all your brothers. As they take it from your hands, so will you recognize it as your own. Salvation can be thought of as a game that happy children play. It was designed by one who loves his children and would replace their fearful toys with joyous games, which teach them that the game of fear is gone. His game instructs in happiness because there is no loser. Everyone who plays must win, and in his winning is the gain to everyone insured. The game of fear is gladly laid aside when children come to see the benefits salvation brings. You who have played that you are lost to hope, abandoned by your father, left alone in terror in a fearful world, made mad by sin and guilt. Be happy now. That game is over. Now a quiet time has come in which we put away the toys of guilt and lock our quaint and childish thoughts of sin forever from the pure and holy minds of heaven's children and the Son of God. We pause but for a moment more to play our final happy game upon this earth. And then we go to take our rightful place where truth abides and games are meaningless. So is the story ended. Let this day bring the last chapter closer to the world, that everyone may learn the tale he reads of terrifying destiny, defeat of all his hopes, his pitiful defense against a vengeance he cannot escape, is but his own deluded fantasy. God's ministers have come to waken him from the dark dreams of this story. From the dark dreams this story has evoked in his confused, bewildered memory of this distorted tale. God's Son can smile at last on learning that it is not true. And then we begin a practice meditation session. I'm going to skip. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to end it here. So the ministers of God, we're all ministers of God. The Son of God, we are all the Son of God. So when you're and you realize that for yourself by teaching it to others. And if you withhold from others, you withhold from yourself and realize nothing. And so you can see that understanding of what's going on in your world from that lesson that I just read, it's a kind of a very wordy, intellectual understanding, and you can like think about it. Is this true? Could it be true? And it gives you clues in that what I just read about how the significance of how you choose to see it, depending on how you see things going on in the outer world, can make or break you in terms of you're living in a nightmare or you're living in a happy dream, beginning to wake up. And again, if you, but even in this, there's like a hint of that there may be energy work to do, because it talks about having a quiet time and going within, right, and feeling. So if you have be still a moment, and in silence think how holy is your purpose, how secure you rest, untouchable within its light. And we pause for a moment more to play our final happy game upon this earth. So in that pause and in that stillness, you feel a different quality of energy. And it doesn't quite say it in this lesson, but it's if you are still a moment and see how secure you rest. A secure rest is a kind of restful kind of energy. You don't think about rest, right? You experience rest, and that's an energy. There's an energetic quality to it. So it's sort of like, it's not specifically mentioning it, but it's there. And most people will never even think about stuff like this. If you're like really listening to this show, you're kind of not a common person. And most people will never even realize that they are not the voice in the head. Some people will get to the point where they realize that and kind of stand back a little and watch it. And there's some value in that, getting that distance, because then you start to take charge of your own reactions. And that's usually the path of self-improvement. But if you keep working on that, self-improvement becomes spiritual, because you aren't just disidentified from the voice in the head. You begin to take charge of your reality. We have complete dominion over this world that we have made. So you begin to take charge of your reality. And that is where the application of energy work to all of this begins to happen. I mean, even people who have become disidentified from the egoic mind and realize that if I'm reacting against something that happened out there in the outer world, that's all me, that's my projection, but they still react against it. It's so hard to break yourself of that habit. And it's easy to forget. And so they keep making the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. They understand, they understand intellectually, but there's no actual skill in not doing the same thing again like you've been doing for millions of lives, millions of lifetimes, over and over and over and over and over again. But my experience is that when you begin to perceive it all energetically rather than intellectually, it becomes a lot easier not to fall for it, not to fall for the ego's illusions. It's like you get to where, they'll think about, there's a rope lying on the ground, but you think it's a snake, and so you're afraid of it. But then once you realize it's a rope, you're not afraid anymore. Once you realize it's a rope, you can never be afraid again. So, one way of realizing it's a rope is to do the breath work. So, and I know we have there are a lot of people right now with all that's going on, and there's a lot going on. People are kind of like putting their heads under the sand like ostriches, trying to deny all that's going on because it's overwhelming and too much to deal with. People are pretending like everything is fine. And like I say, when I talk about positive energy, I don't mean pretending like everything is fine, but I don't mean giving into the negativity and just like giving up and being a doom and gloomer. And because negativity just breeds more negativity. If you focus on the negativity, you're just going to create more of that in your life. And you focus on the positivity, you create more positivity in your life. But focusing on the positivity is not done by lying to yourself. It's done through doing the work. So I know there's a lot of people right now who are feeling stressed out and overwhelmed, like there's nothing that they can do. And they've heard enough lectures, they've heard enough people explaining what you need to do politically, which grassroots organization you need to go to, which charity you need to donate to, who you need to support, how you should hate people who wear masks because they're pessimists, or hate people who don't wear masks because they're conspiracy theorists. And I know you're tired from all that. I don't want to get in, I don't want to offer people something that's just talking and yada, 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 and doesn't change anything. So I'm doing a group breath work by Zoom on Saturday, May 28th. Saturday, May 28th, group breath work by Zoom. You can lay down in the comfort of your own home. And have an experience of this energy and have used this energy instead of thoughts and words and recommended actions and grassroots organizations or whatever else the rest of it is. Just like go at it with the energy. Forget the words, forget the stories, forget the concepts and the intellectual justifications, and just go at it with the energy. So it's going to be Zoom, May 28th, which is a Saturday. And if you go to patreon.com/Ray Bratcher, all the info you need to sign up is there. Patreon is Patreon, P as in purple. It's like patron. It's like a place for patrons to support people who are doing work that the mainstream doesn't want to support, like me. So Patreon, patreon.com, and then I have my own page. So /Ray Bratcher, RayBratcher. I hope that you will join us and get some benefit and get something you don't normally get, because normally it's just words. All right. Love you all. Bless you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being you. Have a good weekend. Get out in nature. And Let me check Facebook, see if there's what's going on over here. So this will be available later. Did anybody join me on Zoom? I posted the link for Zoom, and then I completely forgot to mention it again. All right, I think that's it then. I feel complete. I don't see any questions. Thank you, Josh. I think today went off without a hitch. This was great. All right, what do I in first, Facebook or Zoom? All right, I'm going to say goodbye now. Love you all. Thank you for coming.